Hi everyone and welcome back to Waterhouse Forde. So Oscar, today we're going to strip the cylinder head. We're going to be removing the valves and we're going to get a first look at the state of the valves and find out what they're actually, what condition they're in, and obviously that can begin to tell us a little bit about the engine or the state of the engine. Okay. Alright. What do you think we're going to find? Any ideas?
Well, looking at the oil, I think we're going to find a lot of dirt.
A lot of dirt, yeah. That definitely seems to be one of the big things about this engine, is a lot of dirt, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, an interesting thing that I think I've come to realise, when we opened up the engine, we found a lot of sand in the engine, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's not usual. It feels like sand anyway. And then I remembered that this tractor has been sandblasted.
Oh.
Yeah. So what I suspect has happened, although they seem to have taken a fair amount of care in trying to block up all the holes and the openings on the engine, I suspect that actually the sand managed to get in and mix with the oil. I think that's what's happened, because with that amount of sand or grit, let's call it, in the oil, if they'd actually run the engine with that, I'm pretty sure the engine would be in a much worse state than it is.
Yeah.
So I think actually what we're seeing is actually just some of the grit from the sandblasting, and luckily they never actually ran the engine like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so today's video we're going to get into the head. We're going to strip out the valves, basically strip the head generally. We're also going to just check it for trueness and make sure that it's serviceable and can be, it's good to be rebuilt. There'll be a future video, the actual rebuilding. Today is just the stripping and checking, testing, that kind of thing. So I hope you enjoy and follow along.
Dad, can you come hold?
What?
Can you come hold? Thank you.
Now, what I wanted to show you quickly, the first thing we can look at is the state of each of the, I suppose, the combustion for each cylinder. So what we've got, this is number 1 here. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, obviously. Now, Oscar, shine in number 1, please. Okay, so we're looking at, that's number 1. And we can see a fair amount of carbon in there. But the other thing I've noticed is that if you look at the amount of carbon here, it's not so much. Now obviously this is your main combustion chamber in here. The piston comes almost right up to the top, so level with the top of the head here, obviously with just the gasket thickness between them. And then we've got the exhaust valve, which is not too carboned up, and the inlet valve, which has got a bit of carbon on it, but nothing unusual. But again, not a lot on the rest of this chamber here. Now if we come across to number 2, which is here, we see a very similar story with the valve. So inlet valve, a little bit of carbon, not so much on the exhaust. No, sorry, that's the other way around, that's the exhaust. So quite a bit of carbon on the exhaust one this time, and not so much on the inlet. But notice quite a bit of carbon on this surface up here. And if I scrape that, it's loose, it's not burnt on, which is a bit strange and a bit weird. Normally this carbon at this point is burnt on. Number 3 is it's okay. Again, a little bit of carbon up here, a bit of deposit there, oily deposit. Normal amount of carbon in the combustion chamber, so nothing to be too concerned about there. And finally, number 4, we see again very similar on the valves. So exhaust and inlet, quite a bit on the exhaust, not so much on the inlet. And then, but up here, I mean, this has got a huge amount of deposit on it. And again, it's not hard, it's soft, which I don't really understand as to why that's happened. But nevertheless, it would seem to me that cylinder number 4 was not firing 100% correctly. That would be my diagnosis. The others are okay. I think with the engine standing for a long time, that's probably why we get this soft deposit at the top here. It's the only thing I can think of. And then the amount of actual carbon deposits in the combustion chambers, it's not unusual. As in, I'm not seeing anything really in there that's concerning, except that number 4 seems to be much more carboned up than the others. So again, what that suggests to me is that number 4 basically wasn't firing as optimally as the other 3. Not massively so, but just not great. Anyway, again, the whole engine's being rebuilt, so ultimately none of this really matters, other than it gives us a bit of an indication of the status of the engine before we started. Okay, now what we've got is it's just it's a simple valve spring compressor. It has different adapters that you can fit on. This one's the biggest one. I think it's around 30 or 32 millimeter.
30 millimeters, it says.
30. Okay, and then on this side we've got the next one down on the back side, holding the face of the valve. Just because there's quite a deep combustion chamber, and we just needed something to bring that up. So Oscar's going to wind that up for us now, and hopefully that'll compress the spring, and we'll be able to get the cotter pins out. The what are they called? Keep going.
That way.
Hang on. Got to keep it straight.
Easy to work in.
So the only problem with these tools is that they kind of move quite easily. Tighten. You do have to hold them on the spring, otherwise they do tend to want to drift off, which is a bit annoying. Okay, hang on. As far as I can see, this thing is not working. What's actually happening is it's actually opening, these legs are actually opening up. Instead
Spring's
of
too strong.
the spring. Basically, the spring is too strong.
I mean, that looks pretty strong.
Yeah, I know.
It's probably hollow.
Oh, it is hollow, it's just a part.
I thought it would be, solid.
Right, release. Slowly.
Yeah.
Right, so our brand new valve spring compressor tool was utterly useless. So what we've resorted to doing is doing it in the press. Now what we had to do was to make a small wooden block that sits down in the compression chamber, thus holding the valves up whilst we compress the spring. Now obviously as we move now to the next cylinder, we're going to have to remove that block. So Oscar, take this away please. We have to move the block into the next combustion chamber, and of course these two valves will come out now as well when we remove that block. So hopefully you can follow this on the camera.
I've got that one, and then if you can just push that one. Got it.
Okay. Now what we'll do is we'll put this block in the next combustion chamber and move on to the next, essentially the next cylinder. Okay, come down.
Come down!
Keep going. Okay. Now what you want to do with these, I can't remember what these little pins are called, but you have to push them back from the stem, the valve stem, and then lift them up.
I've got it, I've got it.
Okay?
Into the bag.
There you go. Get that one. Okay. So it's just basically two half or semicircular clips. I can't for the life of me think what they're called now. I will remember. I'll look up the name and I'll put it in the comments of the video. But they just need to come out, and then we can now slowly release the pressure, and that allows the spring to come up all the way. Okay. And then we can remove that spring. That goes in the bag. Thank you, Oscar.
I only just realised there's a spring and a...
Yeah, it's a spring and a cap, yeah. Okay, now we can move this over so that it's under the... Just hang on, Oscar. Okay, off you go. We can do the next one. Right, let's get these valves out. So we'll just turn it up. The block comes out and the valves go through.
Add the valves to our collection. Okay, there we go.
Okay.
Man.
Yeah, that one's not happy, is it?
Okay,
The
we
valve's
need some
very
penetrating
stuck.
oil.
No, don't be silly. Just
Give it a little whack. There's always something to hurt. I think I've got the right chamber. Oh yeah. Got it.
so that valve was very stuck, wasn't it?
Yeah, so are we gonna replace these valves?
Oh yeah. So there we have the valves and a greasy face. Right, Oscar, show people what you were showing me.
So this one has more of a curve than this one. Like it's a
It is interesting,
different
isn't it? So
design.
that one is different. The profile of the valve is quite different from all of the others. All the others have got this more sort of flat profile, and that one has a rounded profile. It's almost like that one's been changed at some point. Now, the interesting thing is it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was that one that was very stiff, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was the one that was stiff. Because I remember it being very black.
Anyway, other than that, the valves themselves are not too bad. So looking at this one here, for example, we put it on a white background, we can see that the valve itself is, I mean, it's obviously been used, but look at the shine on that face. It's a good face, and it is consistent all the way around. So happy with that, just as an example. Now, we look at one of our inlet valves, and we can see that that is not as, I mean, the face is also consistent, it's just not as clean. But in terms of the actual, the way it's been cut in, it's not too bad. The only other observation that I would make is that I noticed on one of them, this one here, so this is I think it's the exhaust valve on number 2, has a little bit more carbon buildup than the others, but again, nothing untoward. So all in all, the valves themselves are there or thereabouts, not too bad. Again, your inlet valves seem to be worse than the exhaust valves. This one seems to have a little bit of a unusual face on it, but it's not. It probably was sealing. It looks like it would have been sealing, so that's fine. But and then this one here, as we said, was stiff. So that was probably what we described as a sticking valve. It may have been fine just for the level of movement that it needs to make, which obviously is not very much. But also when we tried to pull it out, we literally had to force it out. It was pretty well stuck in that valve guard. Anyway, let's move on to back to the head and get that. Just finish off stripping that.
What's that, Dad?
It's a good question. I don't know. Let's have a look.
Should we pull it out?
Yeah, so that's some sort of deflector plate, because there'll be oil coming up there, and it's obviously just to deflect the oil so that it doesn't just all sit in one place. So we need to make sure that goes back in the right place. Right, I want to get these 3 studs out. So if you get the stud remover and have a go with that again.
I need small pliers again. There's something in there.
What the heck is that?
I don't know.
Have you ever found one of these in your engine's cooling system?
What is it?
Put some comments in the below. I've got no idea what that is, Oscar. That is a piece of steel. It's still quite strong. Obviously I can bend it and it will break. It's obviously heavily corroded. I'd love to know where that's come from. Okay, I think you can see that now. So inside there, so this is where the valve sits. This is the valve seat here. And inside there we've got the valve guard, and that needs to be pressed back through the head that way. So in order to get to that, we're going to need to make a tool that sits inside that, has a shoulder on it that will allow, or will catch on the side of the guard, but not be as it needs to be smaller than the guard. Hopefully this makes sense. We'll make the tool and then we'll have to show you once we've done it. But basically we'll get this head cleaned up in the meantime, and we'll press out the guards at a later date once we've made that tool. Okay, well look, that's probably as far as we're going to go with this at this stage. We've managed to get everything, pretty much everything, stripped off of the head now. The only thing left is those valve guards. So a little bit like the engine block where we need to pull the sleeves out, and we're busy making a tool for that as well. So a little bit of tooling work to do next. But in the meantime, obviously we'll get this cleaned up. We will probably need to, or we'll probably end up having to sandblast it, bead blast it a little bit to get it completely clean, especially where the carbon has built up on the underside. And obviously once we've done that, one of the things we do have to do, and we still need to check, is how true this face is. Now we can't really do that with all this carbon and stuff on it, so we need to get that cleaned up first, and then we'll be able to work out. I mean, looking at it, there's nothing obvious to suggest that it's going to be in a bad way. If anything, it actually looks like it's in pretty good condition. The only concerning thing that we found is a little bit of a crud in the back, in the waterways, where this Welsh plug wasn't sitting properly. It wasn't sitting in its place properly, but also there was a lot of crud in the back there, and then also in there. And having removed that Welsh plug, we actually found this piece of steel, or this piece of metal inside. Now look, it's probably just a piece of the inside that's broken off, it's corroded off over time, but it looks strange. It doesn't look like I can't recognize where it would have come from. It's almost as if it's somehow worked its way into the cooling system, which is a bit weird, but anyway. So look, that's it for today. That's as far as we can go for now. We still have loads and loads and loads of cleaning to do. There's still a few other bits that need to be dismantled and gone through. But we're getting there now. The block is ready to have the sleeves removed. The head is now ready to have the guards removed, and yeah. We will continue, and hope that you'll join us in the next video next week, when hopefully we'll be moving on with one or both of those. So look, hope you all have a good week, and look forward to seeing you next week, next weekend, and yeah, thanks for joining us. Cheers for now.